Let's start with the syllabus. If you have seen the syllabus of GATE, it has 4 sections. Section A, Engineering Mathematics. Section B, Applied Mechanics and Design. Section C is Fluid Mechanics and Thermal Sciences. Section D is Material Manufacturing and Industrial Engineering. And I'll be mainly discussing about Section C. Section C again consists of fluid mechanics, heat transfer, thermodynamics, and applications. So we are somewhere here in Section C at thermodynamics. So this is a small paragraph. So I intend to cover topics in this paragraph. Now what's in this paragraph? It's about the basic thermodynamics, which we have discussed in 3rd semester course. So I will be mainly revising all those things. The topics are thermodynamic system and processes, properties of pure substances, behavior of ideal and real gases, 0th and 1st law of thermodynamics, calculation of work and heat in various processes, 2nd law of thermodynamics, thermodynamic property chart, tables, availability and irreversibility. And the last one is thermodynamic duration. So this is basic thermodynamics. There is another part of the syllabus which deals with the applied thermodynamics. It is IC engine, gas turbine and steam turbine. So most of the topics of IC engine will be discussing in our regular course. So if you all wish, I can discuss about the turbine portion also after this basic thermodynamics. So in all, I think there are 9 topics, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I intend to spend at least 1 hour or 1.5 hours in discussing the theory for each of the topic, and then we'll also discuss some questions from each of the topic from previous year GATE question paper or engineering services question paper. So this is the plan. Well, execution of the plan depends upon your interest. If you all are interested, then only I'll proceed, and if you attend the class uninterested, then I'll stop. So if you want to attend the class regularly, then you'll have to participate in the tutorial or the quiz questions, or I also intend to give you some questions after every topic. So if you attempt those questions and submit, then I'll feel that you are working with me. Otherwise, we'll stop it. Then I'll understand that you do not want me to continue. So let us discuss with the first topic, thermodynamic system and processes. I'll be mainly dealing with, I'll be covering the syllabus from this book, Engineering Thermodynamics by P.K. Nag, which we also referred when we discussed thermal science in 3rd semester syllabus. But for this course, I'll also be referring to this book called Thermodynamics and Engineering Approach by Eunice Sengil and Bowles. I have got a 6th edition copy of this book, and I've made my slides mainly from this book. So most of the theory which I will be covering is from this particular book. Of course, we'll discuss questions from previous year GATE question paper. So I've got a GATE guide with me. This one. So I'll try to type questions for. I'll segregate question topic wise, and I'll give you few questions after every topic for you to practice and attempt and to see that you have understood whatever I have said. Okay, thermodynamic systems. What is a thermodynamic system? Any identifiable quantity of matter or region in space which is chosen for study is thermodynamic system. Now, everything outside the system is called surrounding, and system and surrounding are separated by boundary. Now, this is the surface which separates the system and surrounding, and this can be real or imaginary. It can be fixed or movable, but for the purpose of calculation, we assume that there is no mass for the system boundary and it doesn't occupy. So mathematically, it's a zero thickness. So if you consider expansion of gases in a piston, then this gases forms our system. And what is the system boundary? This dotted line, red color dotted line, interior to the surface of cylinder and piston, is the system boundary. So as I said, this boundary can be fixed or moving. So if the piston is moving, then this system boundary is moving. And this can be real or imaginary. So here we have a system boundary defined with the help of the surface of the cylinder or the surface of the piston. But then at this portion, it's an imaginary surface. So if some fluid is coming in, then we assume that this opening is the system boundary. So system boundary can be, this system boundary is real, and this part of the system boundary is the imaginary system boundary. Now, system have been classified into two broad categories: closed system or control mass, and open system. And one of the type of closed system can be an isolated system. So we can in fact define system as closed system or control mass, an isolated system or an open system. Isolated system is a type of closed system. Now, what is closed system or control mass? It has fixed amount of mass and no mass can enter or leave a closed surface. Leave a closed system. Energy in the form of heat or work can cross the boundary. So there is a transfer of energy, but there is no transfer of mass across the system boundary. Like there is no transfer of energy even, then that type of system is called isolated system. In fact, any system along with its surrounding can be termed as isolated system. So if you consider system and surrounding of that system as another system, then whatever processes are taking place are within that system and the surrounding. So the outer system would be an isolated system. The other type of system is an open system or control volume. It's like there's a nozzle and some fluid is coming in the nozzle, some processes taking place. This can be heating up of the fluid or increase in the velocity or decrease in the pressure. Now, if we are interested in all those processes, we'll consider this region of space for the purpose of study. And this kind of system is called open system because mass is continuously coming in and mass is continuously going out. We are not focusing on some chunk of mass and moving along with the mass. We have identified fixed space for a study, and this properly selected region or space is the open system. This can involve mass flow. All the engineering devices like compressor, turbines, nozzle, they are all open system. Now for open system, both mass and energy can cross the boundary of the control volume. Again, as we discussed in the previous slide, the boundaries can be real boundary like this. So this boundary can be identified with the boundary of the surface of the nozzle. But this boundary is an imaginary boundary. So this system has two, this surface as the real boundary and this inlet and outlet as the imaginary boundary.
Sir,
Yes.
Sir, why is an open system called a control volume?
Because our focus of study is on a fixed region in space. We are not uh, focusing on fixed amount of or fixed identified particles of the system gas. This kind of
Uh,
system is a control mass. Here, our focus was on the mass which gets heated or whose energy changes or whose pressure changes. Now, in this case, the focus of study is not the mass of the system. Mass is coming in and going out. Some particle comes in, that particle goes out. We are not moving along with those particles. We have focused our attention on a volume. So, whatever happening within this volume, this may be with reference to different mass or different particles. The particle A comes in, it get and it goes out, but the heat transfer take place within this volume, or the work transfer take place within this volume. So we are not moving with that particle. Our focus is on the a fixed region in space, and that's why it's called control volume approach.
Sir, but the boundaries of a system can move. मतलब they are flexible ना कि वो
Yes.
move भी कर सकती हैं stationary भी, तो volume fix कैसे हो सकती है किसी केस में जहाँ पे boundary move कर रही है?
Yes, you could have taken this amount of gas as our focus of study and move along with. Suppose there is a long pipe before this nozzle and there is a turbine after this nozzle. So what you could have done is you have identified some mass and you are moving with this mass. So as that mass enters the nozzle, its velocity increases, pressure decreases. Now as those mass moves out of the nozzle, it rotate the turbine. So there is some heat transfer or work transfer. So this is one type of approach. When you are
Sir, so
moving,
sorry, sir, can you please repeat the entire thing because my network was lost. So sorry, sir.
okay, what I am saying is this nozzle can be part of a larger system. There can be a pipe before this nozzle, and there can be a turbine after this nozzle. So one way of approach could have been to move along with a fixed amount of mass when it's moving in a pipe. So you identified the mass, and then you are moving in the pipe along with this mass, and just taking into consideration what's happening to that particular mass. So when that particular amount of mass enters the nozzle, its velocity increases. When that particular amount of mass moves out into the turbine, then some heat transfer or work transfer take place. So one type of study could have been movement along with this flowing mass. So that would be termed as a control mass approach. The other type of approach can be you do not move along with the mass. Your focus of study is what's happening in the conversion part of this part of the system. So then you imagine a system boundary here, imagine a system boundary here. You are not concerned with which particle or which mass of the system is getting in or which mass is going out. Your concern is what's happening within this space, this region. So that type of study is called a control volume study. Both kind of studies are possible.
Sir, so in general, suppose we do not have isolated systems, or you can say closed systems, which are not practically possible since there is some energy exchange going throughout. तो जैसे मोस्टली ओपन सिस्टम्स होते हैं, अब जैसे अगर हम मानते हैं कि कोई रिजिड पाइप जैसे नोजल है, या हम कोई पाइप का एक सेक्शन ले लेते हैं, उस वॉल्यूम को कंसिडरेशन के अंडर ले लेते हैं, तो
Hmm.
सर अब जैसे अगर कोई पाइप है, मतलब जिसका जो मतलब काफी ज्यादा इलास्टिक है, मतलब जो जो डिफॉर्म हो सकती है, तो
Hmm.
सर इस केस में अब अगर प्रैक्टिकल फ्लो की बात करें, तो अगर कंट्रोल वॉल्यूम हमें लेनी है, तो सर पाइप की डायमेंशंस भी तो चेंज हो रही हैं, तो इसमें मतलब किस चीज को फिक्स करके अपनी स्टडी करेंगे? अगर कोई थर्मोडायनामिक सिस्टम को स्टडी करे।
हाँ, अगर आपका पाइप का वॉल्यूम चेंज हो रहा है, कुछ फ्लूइड अंदर आ रहा है, सपोज देयर इज अनदर ओपनिंग, है ना, देयर इज अ इनलेट वाल्व, देयर इज अ एग्जॉस्ट वाल्व एंड देयर इज अ मूविंग पिस्टन. So again, there can be two type of approach. Your focus of study is what's happening in the cylinder. The volume is not fixed. The volume is increasing and decreasing as this piston is moving up and down. But there are opening. Mass is coming in, mass is going out. So you have identified this surface as the system boundary. This surface as the system boundary, and this inlet, there's an imaginary system boundary. There can be an outlet. Imagine an outlet here, and there's another system boundary. Now this volume is not fixed. This volume is increasing or decreasing, but our focus of study is this region of space. Don't confuse with the fixed volume. The volume is not fixed, however. It's the region of the space, what's happening within this space to that, to whatever amount of fluid or whatever particles coming in or going out, what's happening here. So that kind of study is a control mass study. Imagine this to be a piston, say a engine, an internal combustion engine. So what's happening in the cylinder is a control mass approach. Sorry, control volume approach. But
Yes.
if you are moving with say air and fuel particle right from the intake manifold, even before that, say air coming in, and then you are looking at what's happening to that particular air while it passes through the intake manifold, whether the temperature is increasing or decreasing, density is increasing or decreasing, then you move along with that particular amount of air. That particular mass is your focus of study. Now, when it enters inlet manifold, then you say, oh, what's happening? The combustion taking place. This air is expanding, and then you move out along with this air, move in the say exhaust manifold, and then move out in the tailpipe, and then you say, okay, there's a cooling in the tailpipe, or there's some catalytic converter, some catalysis reaction are taking place, and then it moves out to the atmosphere. So all the time, your focus of study was that particular chunk of mass, and you moved along with that chunk of mass, looking what's happening at different places. Now that kind of study is uh, control mass study. You have identified a control mass, and then you move with that control mass. See.
So just one last question कि जैसे अगर कोई कंट्रोल वॉल्यूम लेते हैं, मतलब या कंट्रोल मास, जैसे कि अगर हमने एक क्यूबिकल बॉक्स कंसिडर कर लिया स्पेस में, अब तो वो एक कंट्रोल वॉल्यूम है। लेकिन अगर हमने दो क्यूबिकल बॉक्स जो एक दूसरे से काफी मतलब आइसोलेटेड हैं और डिस्टिंक्ट हैं, दो अलग जगह कंसिडर कर लिए, तो वो भी कंट्रोल वॉल्यूम हो सकता है। मतलब दो अलग आइसोलेटेड वॉल्यूम्स जो हैं हमने एक साथ कंसिडरेशन में ले रहे हैं, तो मतलब वो कंट्रोल वॉल्यूम हो सकता है।
देखिए, जब आप थर्मोडायनेमिक की स्टडी कर रहे हैं तो वी आर इंटरेस्टेड इन द इंटरेक्शन विद द सिस्टम एंड द सराउंडिंग. अगर एक आपका बॉक्स अलग है और दूसरा बॉक्स अलग है, और एक बॉक्स दूसरे बॉक्स में जो अमाउंट ऑफ फ्लूइड है उसको इफेक्ट नहीं कर रहा है, तो ये दो अलग अलग सिस्टम हो गए, है ना. तो आपने स्टडी करने के लिए क्या करना पड़ेगा, एक जो अपना क्यूबिकल बॉक्स है उसका जो इंटरेक्शन हो रहा है वो उसकी सराउंडिंग के साथ हो रहा है, सराउंडिंग से उसमें हीट ट्रांसफर हो रही है, या सराउंडिंग से कुछ मास ट्रांसफर हो रहा है, तो वो बॉक्स और उसका सराउंडिंग, दैट विल कंप्राइज ऑफ अ सिस्टम एंड सराउंडिंग. दूसरा बॉक्स का अगर इंटरेक्शन पहले बॉक्स से नहीं हो रहा है, देन इट्स देयर इज नो यूज ऑफ कंसीडरिंग बोथ बॉक्सेज एज अ सिंगल सिस्टम. दे आर टू डिफरेंट टाइप ऑफ स्टडीज. दूसरे बॉक्स का इंटरेक्शन उसके सराउंडिंग से होगा. बट व्हाट आई एम सेइंग इज, you can consider one system and one surrounding as a single system. You can select any region for your study. अभी आपने जैसे कहा ना कि isolated system is not possible. So one system and its surrounding, if you consider that entire thing as another system, then that becomes an isolated system. I said this is a system and this is a surrounding. So I arbitrarily draw this as a system, and I said that there's some heat transfer from surrounding to the system. But then I could have included that surrounding also, and I would have said, no, okay, my system, my system is larger uh, uh, perspective, which include this system and this surrounding. Now, for my study, whatever is happening within the system and surrounding. The interaction is between this system and surrounding, and this both these things are within this larger system too. Let us call it system 2, within which lies this surrounding and within which lies this system. Now this system 2 becomes isolated system for that particular study. So system depends upon your choice of study. So what problem you are choosing? Say if you are just uh, focusing on how water is boiling in kettle on gas, some steam is going out of the kettle, then that kettle become your system, and surrounding is the area where the vapors of from the kettle is going out, or from where the heat is being transferred to the kettle. But then if I consider my entire kitchen as a system, then I can say whatever is happening is within that kitchen only. My system is in that kitchen, my surrounding is in that kitchen, that there is no interaction of my fluid of my kitchen with the external. Then that kitchen become my isolated system for that particular study. It all depend upon your choice of problem. The choice of the system depend upon your problem. So you can choose n type of system, all lies on earth. But then if you consider earth as a system, and then it's an isolated system. Whatever heat is there, it's within the earth. Of course, if you neglect radiation from the sun, so burning of fuel and transfer of work, everything is happening within on the earth only. So earth become an isolated system. But then if you want to study radiation from sun to earth, then then the universe is an isolated system. Within that lies the surrounding, that is sun, from where the radiation are emerging and the heat is being transferred to earth. Then the universe is an isolated system which consists of, or our galaxy is a universe isolated system which consists of the sun and the earth itself. So it all depends upon your problem. You can choose a small area from where interaction is taking place outside that system, then it's system and surrounding. But for another system, this entire thing can be a isolated system. Yes, is your doubt clear, or you have some doubts? Okay, how do you define system? We define system with the help of some characteristics which are called property of the system. These are pressure, temperature, volume, and mass. Now these properties can be intensive property, or they can be extensive properties. Now, what are intensive properties? All those properties which are independent of the mass are called intensive properties, like pressure, temperature, and density. The properties whose values depend on the size of the mass or size of the system, they are called extensive property, like total volume or total mass. How do you identify whether a particular property is an intensive property or extensive property? You divide the system into two parts. Suppose there is a system which consists of the properties are mass, volume, temperature, pressure, density. You divide the system. Now for this half, or this part of the system, the mass become half, the volume become half, but the temperature does not become half, pressure does not become half, density does not become half. So all those characteristics which changes with the size of the system, they are extensive properties. So mass and volume depend upon the size of the system, they become extensive property, because when you divided the system, their value changed. And those properties which are independent of the size of the system, they are called intensive property. So intensive stands for independent, extensive means dependent on the mass. Now, there is another concept called continuum. For all our calculation, we assume that matter is continuous, although there are particles, there are molecules and atoms in the matter. And if you go at the microscopic level, then we'll find that it's not continuous. But if the mean free path is of the order of the diameter of the molecules, if the space is not very large, then we can assume that okay, system is continuum. This is an idealization for the purpose of calculation, and it helps us to consider all the properties as the point functions. It depends upon the point. So we can assume that the properties vary continuously in space with no jump in discontinuity. Otherwise, if you consider system as made up of discrete particles, then the properties may change when you move from one particle to another particle. So for all the purpose of thermodynamic calculation, we assume that it's continuously, the properties are continuously changing. So this concept is called continuum. What is the thermodynamic state? So when you have a set of properties that completely describe the system, and all those properties of system have fixed values, then we say that the system is in a fixed state. So thermodynamic state of a system can be defined by, say, mass, temperature, volume. Now, due to some interaction, the state can be changed. So temperature, volume can be different. So this state can be represented on a TV diagram by a single point. I do not know why it's like this. So when within the system there is no temperature difference, then we call that the system is in thermal equilibrium. There is no variation in temperature within the system. When there is no chemical reaction taking place within the system, then it's called chemical equilibrium. And when there is no unbalanced force, then it's called mechanical equilibrium. And when all three exist, then we call it thermodynamic equilibrium. So if you have a system where initially temperature values are 20 degree, 23 degree, 40 degree, but gradually after some time, temperature of this entire system would become uniform. Temperature of the system of temperature of the part which has lower temperature will increase, temperature of the part which has higher temperature will decrease. This will give will transfer heat to the lower temperature chunk of the fluid. So after some time, gradually you will see that entire system comes to a uniform temperature. That time we say the system is in thermal equilibrium. Well, thermodynamic equilibrium is a combination of all these equilibrium. There is another part which I forgot. It's phase equilibrium. The liquid and the gases, they are all in equilibrium. There is no change in the mass fraction of the liquid or the vapor fraction within the system. Then we say that the system is in phase equilibrium. If the vapor is continuously changing, then there is no equilibrium. But after some time, we'll see that the amount of vapor fraction in a two-phase system become uniform, which we call that phase. The system is in phase equilibrium. Now, when all these equilibrium exist, then we say that the system is in thermodynamic equilibrium. So there is a state postulate which says that the state of a simple compressible system is completely specified by two independent intensive properties. So if you have two properties, then you can completely define the state of the system. How do you define completely? Because all other properties can be calculated using these two properties, because we have certain rule certain laws with the help of which we can calculate all other properties. We have Boyle's law, Charles' law, and a combination of those is a gas equation. PV is equal to RT. What is P? What is V? What is T? P is the absolute pressure in Newton per meter square. T is the absolute temperature in Kelvin, and V in this equation is the specific volume meter cube per kg. So what is R? You must have used this equation for calculation. This we studied right from +2 when we study about Boyle's law and Charles' law. But most of the students have some confusion. That's why I included this in basic concept. There's confusion in R. What is R in this equation? See, R depends upon the unit of V. In this equation, R is the gas constant, also called as characteristic gas constant. This equation is called ideal gas equation of state, or simply the ideal gas relation. It's a gas that obeys this relation is called ideal gas. This is not universal gas constant. In chemistry, you might have studied about universal gas constant, Ru, whose value is fixed. Now, the R which is used in this particular equation, when unit of V is meter cube per kg, then R on the right hand side is universal gas constant divided by molecular weight of that gas. This R universal has a fixed value. It is in SI system of unit. It is 8.3144 kilojoule per kilomole Kelvin. These are other systems of unit. And this M is the molar mass or molecular weight. For air, if you consider 79% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, calculate proportionate molecular weight of oxygen molecule by considering 0.79 time molecular weight of nitrogen and 0.21 time molecular weight of oxygen, then it comes out to be 28.97. So this is molecular weight of oxygen, molecular weight of air. So we want to calculate R for air, then it should be 8.314 divided by the molecular weight of air. Does anybody remember the value? But there is another type of equation similar to this, which is written as PV is equal to nRT. Now this N is number of moles, and here this V is volume, not in terms of meter cube per kg. If you write, so no, this volume is meter cube, of course, but if you write this equation like this, P and specific volume, then you can write this V divided by N. In that case, this volume become meter cube per mole. So this M.
There are
I can't listen. I can't hear to you. आवाज कट गई आपकी, क्या बोल रहे हैं आप? हेलो, कैन यू स्पीक अगेन? हेलो, am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
You're audible.
Okay, so what was the question? See, what I want to tell you is there are two different type of equation. One is PV is equal to RT. The other is also PV is equal to RT. But V in this case, if it's in meter cube per kg, then R is characteristic gas constant, which is different for different gas. But if V is meter cube per mole, meter cube per kg mole, then R on the right hand side is universal gas constant. How these two equations are related? Because mass of the gas can be written as molecular weight into number of moles. Molecular weight is defined as kg per kg mole of the gas or of the fluid. So m, that is kg, is equal to m, that is kg per kg mole, multiplied by n. N is the mole, kg mole. So if you write capital V is equal to m into small v, capital V is the volume meter cube, small v is the specific volume meter cube per kg. So meter cube per kg multiplied by kg will give you total meter cube. So capital V is equal to m into v. So this gives you, if you substitute in this equation, then this gives you P capital V upon m is equal to RT. That means PV is equal to mRT. Now m into R can be written as mn into R, because I just said m is equal to m into n. M is the molecular weight of the gas, n is the kg mole of the gas. So if you write like this, and n, m into n, you are writing mr is equal to m as m into small m as capital M into capital N into R. This become n into Ru, because molecular weight into gas constant is Ru. This equation. Ru is capital R into m. So R into m becomes Ru. So this gives you PV is equal to, on the right hand side, instead of mR, you can write n into Ru. Now here n is kg mole. Ru is in terms of kilojoule per kg mole. And again, if you write V divided by n as a specific volume, then this equation is again written as PV is equal to RUT. So it looks similar to this initial equation, but here V is meter cube per kg and R is different for different gases, calculated on the using their molecular weight. In this equation, PV is equal to RT. This R is a universal gas constant whose value is fixed for every fluid, whatever fluid you consider. And V is meter cube per kg mole, not written here, but V bar is molar volume. Molar volume means meter cube per kg mole. So this is also a specific volume. This is also a specific volume, but V with a bar over it is in terms of molar specific volume, and this is meter cube per kg. You should understand the difference between this PV is equal to RT and this PV is equal to RT. Yes, any doubts? Should we proceed?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this value you should remember. R for air is 8.314 divided by 28.97. Of course, you can calculate, but the value for air is 0.2870. You got this value using this formula. And if you know molecular weight of any of the gas, then divide that divide 8.314 by that molecular weight, you will get gas constant R for different gases. So for nitrogen, for oxygen, if you know the molecular weight, then R for nitrogen becomes 8.314 divided by 28. R for oxygen become 8.314 divided by 32. So for any gas, you can calculate the value of R. This value is different for different gases. So in thermodynamics, we mainly use this equation because P is in SI unit, Newton per meter square, and we consider in meter cube per kg, or we write P capital V is equal to M into RT. So small v is capital V upon M. M is in kg. So PV is equal to MRT. Now in this case, this R is the characteristic gas constant. In chemistry, mainly people uses universal gas equation PV is equal to RUT. For all our calculation, we'll be using PV is equal to RT, where R is the gas constant and V is meter cube per kg. Okay, that was about state of the system and relationship between different properties of the system. Now, when the system changes its state, we call it a process. So any change from one equilibrium state to another is termed as process. You can define the state of the system on a property diagram. So this x-axis is some property of the system that can be pressure, volume, temperature, entropy, enthalpy, and y volume is a different property. And then one point on this property diagram represent state of the system. Second point represent another state of the system. And when system travels through these two states, it changes from one equilibrium state to another state. We call it a process. Like there can be again a cylinder with a piston, and if this piston is moving, so the volume is decreasing. So the system changes from one state to another state. Now this change in state can be very slow or it can be very fast. A very slow changes in state is called quasi-equilibrium. Now what is this quasi-equilibrium or quasi-static process? Quasi-static means when all the points along the process are in equilibrium point. So we define quasi-static process is a process which proceeds in such a manner that the system remains infinitesimally close to an equilibrium state at all the times. So it's a very slow process, and as this piston moves in, we assume that the state of the system is in equilibrium. As the system further moves in, we assume that the state is in equilibrium. As the piston further moves in, we assume that system is in equilibrium. So every point on this curve represent an equilibrium point. Then only you can represent a system by a continuous line. Now, if it's a very fast change in state, then the intermediate point are non-equilibrium point. Then we do not represent the process by continuous line, rather we represent it by a dashed line. So quasi-static process is a sufficiently slow process that allows the system to adjust itself internally, but it's an idealized process. It's good for calculations, easy to analyze such kind of system, and for a work producing devices, it produces maximum work. For work absorbing device, it absorbs minimum work because there are no losses, there is no frictional losses for a quasi-static process. So all those processes which we will study for the purpose of calculation are quasi-static or ideal processes. Suppose a system is at initial state represented by point 1 on a PV diagram, and it travels through series of equilibrium point and moves to state point 2. So now initially this was the system and finally this is the system. It's been represented by this path. Now while system is moving from one equilibrium point to another equilibrium point, it can follow certain rule. Depending upon the rule followed during the process, we name this process. So we can have an isothermal process. During the entire process, if the temperature remain constant, we call it an isothermal process. During the entire process, if the pressure remain constant, we call it an isobaric process. Isobaric process can be represented by a horizontal line on a PV diagram. So state point 1 here, pressure remain constant, volume increases, state point 2. Or if it's a compression process, then this system moves from right to left. This is an isobaric process. The other can be isochoric process where volume remain constant, or isoentropic process where the entropy during the process remain constant, or an adiabatic process when there is no heat transfer during the entire process, or a constant enthalpy process. So these are different processes. Say on this PV diagram, this point was the initial state. The system can move following two different rules. From 1 to 2, it follows this rule that the volume is constant, it's represented by vertical line. So 1 to 2 is an isochoric process. From 2 to 3, the system moves such that the pressure is constant. So it's an isobaric process. Again, it can come back to 3 to 4 using an adiabatic process or an isoentropic process. We'll study later and we'll derive a formula for work transfer during the process. This work transfer can be calculated graphically also. It's given by the area below the curve. So for an isochoric process on a PV diagram, the area is 0, so there is no work transfer. For an isobaric process 2 to 3, this entire area represents the work done by the system. So if you have pressure value is 350, and if you find out the area considering the line segment, this one, so this multiplied by this gives you area of the rectangle. This will give you the work done by the system while it moves from 2 to 3. So 0.8 minus 0.4 is 0.4. 0.4 multiplied by 350 in terms of kilojoule, because kilopascal multiplied by meter cube is kilojoule, is the work done by the system when it moves from 2 to 3. Now when there are series of series of processes such that the system come back to its original state, then we call it as a thermodynamic cycle. So system moves from 1 to 2 through some process, say isothermal process, from 2 to 3 using say isoentropic process, 3 to 4 again isothermal, but this time compression, 4 to 1 say isoentropic compression. Then this 1, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, 1 is a thermodynamic cycle. What is the name of this cycle? 2 isoentropic process and 2 isothermal process. Carnot cycle. Yes, this is the ideal cycle. So isothermal expansion, isoentropic expansion, isothermal compression, and isoentropic compression. Now when there's an expansion, system gives work. So there's net work output, and we can calculate net work output by calculating the area below the curve 1, 2. 2 to 3 is again net work output. Whenever there is a increase in the volume, it's net work output. Now when there is a decrease in the volume, then surrounding is doing some work on the system. System is compressing, it's decreasing in the volume. So work absorbed. Work absorbed is given by area below this curve 3, 4. 4 to 1 is also work absorbed. So for this cycle, net work transferred by the system to the surrounding is area below 1, 2 plus area below 2, 3 minus area below 3, 4 minus area below 4, 1. That becomes the area of this cycle. So if you can calculate area of this cycle 1, 2, 3, 4, this will give you the net work transfer for this particular cycle. We'll calculate analytically also in one of our future classes. I just want to give you an idea of work transfer is given by the area of the cycle on a PV diagram. And if you can draw a TS diagram, so this cycle, this is the same cycle. This is isothermal expansion, isoentropic compression, isothermal heat rejection, and isoentropic expansion. So these cycle and this cycle is same, but this cycle has been drawn on a PV diagram. This cycle has been drawn on a TS diagram. Now on this cycle, we'll again calculate a formula for heat transfer that comes out to be T into ds. So that means area below the curve on a TS diagram is equal to heat transfer. So heat given in is equal to area below this curve 1, 2. And if it is from right to left on a TS diagram, then it's heat rejected. So net heat transfer for this cycle is area below 1, 2 minus area below 3, 4. That becomes area of this cycle. There is no heat transfer during the process 2, 3. It's like a vertical line. And there is no heat transfer during the process 4, 1. So net heat transfer for this particular cycle becomes area of this cycle. The area of a thermodynamic cycle on a TS diagram is net heat transfer. Area of a cycle on a PV diagram is the net work transfer. Yes, are you listening?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So I just said that area on a PV diagram is net heat transfer, and area of the cycle on a TS diagram is net work transfer. Yes? Is that okay?
Yes.
No, then you are
No,
not.
sir. सर पीवी वाले पे वर्क ट्रांसफर होएगा और टीएस वाले पे हीट ट्रांसफर होएगा.
हाँ. See, area of the cycle on a TS diagram is heat transfer, and area of cycle on a PV diagram is a work transfer. But then we'll study first law of thermodynamics, which says that for a cycle, net heat transfer is equal to net work transfer. So that means on a PV diagram, this area represents work transfer as well as heat transfer. Similarly, this area represents heat transfer, but since first law of thermodynamics says that for a closed cycle, heat transfer is equal to work transfer, so this area also represents work transfer. So area of a closed cycle on a TS diagram or on a PV diagram represent net heat transfer as well as net work transfer. Well, the statement is not true for a single process, but this statement is true for a closed cycle. So for a process 1 to 2, area below the curve 1 to 2 on a TS diagram represent heat transfer. It doesn't represent work transfer if it is a single process. And similarly, for a single process 1 to 2 on a PV diagram, the area below the curve represent work transfer. But as soon as you talk about a closed cycle, we have a law which says for a closed cycle, net work transfer is equal to net heat transfer. So this area represent work transfer, but as according to first law of thermodynamics, this is also equal to heat transfer. This area represent heat transfer, but according to thermodynamics, for a closed cycle, net heat transfer is equal to net work transfer. So this area also represent work transfer. So it's one and the same thing. Another cycle.
क्वेश्चन था
हाँ
सर, ये जो पीवी ग्राफ बना रखा है इसमें तो जो टीएच कांस्टेंट वाली लाइन है
हाँ
तो उसमें हमारी एंट्रोपी तो इंक्रीज हो रही होगी ना उस समय।
हाँ,
तो सर ये जो जहाँ पे क्यू आउट है तो उस
ये
समय एंट्रोपी
ये जो 1 2 लाइन है ना यहाँ पे जो बनाई है, यही 1 2 लाइन यहाँ बनाई है। ये 1 पे एंट्रोपी की वैल्यू ये इतनी है और 2 पे एंट्रोपी की वैल्यू इतनी है। तो 1 से 2
लेकिन
पे
सर जो
एंट्रोपी
3 4 लाइन है उसमें एंट्रोपी कम कैसे हो सकती है?
क्यों नहीं हो सकती है कम?
क्योंकि सर एंट्रोपी तो मतलब रैंडमनेस हो गई ना, वो तो हमेशा इंक्रीज करती है।
एंट्रोपी का मतलब हम लोग डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे। इट्स नॉट वाइज टू से कि एंट्रोपी इज रैंडमनेस ओनली। एंट्रोपी entropy, whenever you give heat to a system, then entropy of the system increases, and when the system reject heat, the entropy always decreases. आप जो randomness कह रहे हो, अगर उस वे में भी आप सोचो तो जब आप किसी चीज को हीट करोगे तो उसका randomness बढ़ेगा, तो
Yes, sir.
उसका एंट्रोपी बढ़ेगा, और जब वो हीट रिजेक्ट करेगा, टेम्परेचर कम होएगा, तो मॉलिक्यूल थोड़े सुस्त हो जाएंगे, तो एंट्रोपी कम हो जाएगी।
अच्छा, जैसे एक लॉ नहीं था जैसे जो कहता है कि मतलब रैंडमनेस यूनिवर्स की हमेशा इंक्रीज होती रहती है, हम कुछ भी प्रोसेस करते हैं तो।
हाँ बिल्कुल, आप सही कह रहे हो, और वो यूनिवर्स की बात हो गई ना, सिस्टम की बात नहीं हुई।
अच्छा, ठीक है।
आपने स्टेटमेंट बिल्कुल सही बोला, लेकिन उस स्टेटमेंट में यूनिवर्स आ गया, तो अगर आप सिस्टम और सराउंडिंग दोनों की एंट्रोपी कैलकुलेट करोगे, तो अगर आप हीट ट्रांसफर फ्रॉम सराउंडिंग टू सिस्टम करोगे तो सिस्टम की एंट्रोपी बढ़ेगी। हीट कहाँ से गई? सराउंडिंग से सिस्टम में गई। सराउंडिंग की एंट्रोपी घटेगी, लेकिन जितनी इसकी बढ़ी और जितनी इसकी घटी वो दोनों बराबर नहीं होते हैं। तो अगर आप चेंज इन एंट्रोपी कैलकुलेट करोगे सराउंडिंग का और सिस्टम का, दैट मींस वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट द यूनिवर्स, सिस्टम प्लस सराउंडिंग, तो वो एंट्रोपी हमेशा बढ़ती है। तो फॉर यूनिवर्स दैट इज कंबाइंड सम ऑफ चेंज इन एंट्रोपी फॉर सिस्टम एंड सराउंडिंग ऑलवेज इंक्रीजेस for all practical processes. Of course, for reversible processes, we'll be studying about this. There's a Clausius theorem and Clausian inequality. When we define entropy, then we'll be discussing this in detail. But it's good that you asked that question. So entropy of the system increases. हाँ जी,
सर ऐसे सोच सकते हैं जैसे डी जो होती है डीएस होती है वो डी क्यू बाई टी होती है, तो अगर डी क्यू नेगेटिव है तो आपकी डीएस नेगेटिव हो जाएगी।
हाँ आप जो कह रहे हो वो पार्शियली सही है। डी एस इज इक्वल टू डी क्यू बाई टी होती है, लेकिन वो डी क्यू रिवर्सिबल हीट ट्रांसफर है, वो हीट ट्रांसफर इन अ रिवर्सिबल प्रोसेस है।
सर जैसे हम जितनी
तो आप
एनर्जी
डी क्यू अगर पॉजिटिव होगा तो डी एस भी पॉजिटिव होगा, डी क्यू नेगेटिव होगा तो डी एस भी नेगेटिव होगा। ये फॉर्मूला आपका सही है, लेकिन ये डी क्यू और प्रैक्टिकल डी क्यू में थोड़ा सा फर्क है। सो
हाँ जी हाँ जी सर, जैसे हमारे प्रोसेस होते हैं वो परफेक्टली क्वासी स्टैटिक नहीं हो सकते, मतलब कि हर स्टेज पे इक्विलिब्रियम नहीं मेंटेन हो सकती। सो जैसे अगर ये कोई जैसे कार्नोट साइकिल, थ्योरेटिकल कार्नोट साइकिल की बात करते हैं पीरियड डायग्राम में, और उसी का एक थ्योरेटिकल टीएस डायग्राम बनाते हैं, आई सपोज ये वही है, तो फिर इस केस में जो क्यू इन और क्यू आउट है वो रिवर्सिबल होगी ना कभी, या मतलब उसमें भी हम जैसे है
हाँ, इसमें आपने बिल्कुल सही कहा, इसमें जो क्यू इन बाय टी है और क्यू आउट बाय टी है वो बराबर होगा, इसीलिए जितना एंट्रोपी यहाँ पे बढ़ा है उतना ही क्यू देने पे, कुछ क्यू देने पे वो एंट्रोपी बढ़ा है, और वही क्यू आपने जब रिजेक्ट किया तो एंट्रोपी कम हो गया है, तो वापस उसी स्टेट पे आ गया। एक्चुअल केस में अगर क्यू रिवर्सिबल प्रोसेस नहीं है तो ये वापस उसी एंट्रोपी वाले पॉइंट पे नहीं आएगा। हीट ऐड करेंगे और हीट रिजेक्ट करेंगे तो जो चेंज इन एंट्रोपी होगा वो डिफरेंट होगा।
तो सर इस केस में जो साइकिल बनाई है, तो सर इसमें जो क्यू इन और क्यू आउट है, ये मतलब क्यू रिवर्सिबल ही है?
हाँ, ये रिवर्सिबल है। कार्नोट साइकिल इज अ रिवर्सिबल साइकिल। These are isoentropic processes. Isoentropic means reversible adiabatic. So this is reversible adiabatic, this is reversible isothermal, this is reversible adiabatic, this is reversible isothermal.
हाँ जी सर।
हम बहुत डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे जब एक बार एंट्रोपी के टॉपिक पे पहुंच जाए। So we'll draw this cycle again and I'll tell you what does this ds is equal to dq by t mean when ds is greater than dq by t, when ds is equal to dq by t, and when ds is less than dq by t. This is Clausius inequality which we are talking about. Okay, I was talking about thermodynamic cycle. This is another cycle which we have been discussing in our heat transfer IC engine classes these days. 1, 2 is the let us look at this diagram on a PV diagram. So 0 to 1 suction from top dead center to bottom dead center, then isoentropic compression, then heat addition at constant volume. So piston remain stationary and heat transfer taking place. And then isoentropic expansion, then heat rejection again at constant volume at a fixed position of the piston. This is an ideal Otto cycle, air standard Otto cycle. So this is suction, compression, heat addition, expansion, heat rejection, and exhaust stroke. If you have attended last 2 or 3 classes, last class I said suction, it goes like this. An actual cycle isoentropic compression is a curve, and it's not constant volume heat addition. It is again heat addition process is represented by a curve, and it's not isoentropic expansion, it's again represented by a curve. So it's all, there are no sharp corner in actual cycle, they are all curved cycles. So this is Otto cycle represented on a PV diagram, and this is the same Otto cycle represented on a TS diagram. So few properties. One is specific volume or density. Density is defined as mass per unit volume. It's reciprocal of specific volume. Specific volume is volume per unit mass. It depends upon temperature and pressure. For most gases, it's proportional to pressure and it's inversely proportional to temperature. Now, if you look at density of water, it doesn't changes much with pressure. At 20 degrees centigrade, 1 atmosphere is 998 kg per meter cube. But if pressure is increased to 100 atmosphere, it's the change is from 998 to 1003. But it does change it with temperature. So from 20 degree to 75 degree centigrade, the density changes from 998 to 978. But the change in density for liquid is not much. We assume liquid to be incompressible. But for gases, density changes. I just said it is proportional to pressure, linearly changes with pressure, and it's inversely changes with temperature. Now this is important data. At 4 degrees centigrade, 1 atmosphere density of water is 1000 kg per meter cube, and this density is taken as reference for calculation of specific gravity of the fluid. Specific gravity is defined as ratio of density divided by ratio of density of water, which is 1000. So it is rho divided by rho of H2O. So if you look at the specific gravities of some substances, we assume water to be of a specific gravity 1. Now, these are the substances whose specific gravity is more than 1. So that means they are heavier than water. This you should remember. The specific gravity of mercury is 13.6. So that means the density of mercury is 13.6 multiplied by 1000 kg per meter cube. And then there are certain certain liquid whose density is less than density of water. If you visit petrol pump, on meter, it displays what is the amount you have to pay, and it also displays what is the specific gravity of the fuel on that particular day. So this is density divided by density of water. So 0.7 density means it's 70% lighter than water. Uh, There are different types of temperature scales. There's something called 2-point scale, where we identify numerical values to certain reproducible states as two fixed point. Usually they are taken as ice point and steam point, where in Celsius scale, we assume ice point to be 0 degree centigrade and steam point to be 100 degree centigrade. So this Celsius temperature scale was discovered by a Swedish astronomer, A. Celsius. And, I do not know, but sometimes people ask question in what year it was discovered. So this astronomer lived from 1702 to 1744. Then there is a German instrument manufacturer who discovered Fahrenheit scale. In Fahrenheit scale, the ice point is 32 degree Fahrenheit and steam point is 212 degree Fahrenheit. And this is the interconversion of centigrade scale to Celsius scale to Fahrenheit scale. Celsius scale and centigrade scale is one and the same thing. Earlier it was called centigrade scale. Later we start calling it Celsius scale. So this formula you should remember, that C by 5 is equal to F minus 32 by 9. This is interconversion of Celsius to Fahrenheit. Now there is something called thermodynamic temperature scale. So it's independent of properties of the substance, and it is in conjunction of second law of thermodynamics. We'll be studying about this in detail after we study about second law of thermodynamics. For now, you can just take it for granted that there is a Kelvin scale where the ice point is 0 Kelvin, and a Rankine scale, again the ice point is 0 Rankine, and they have been discovered by these scientists. And it is not 2-point scale, unlike this point. Here you need 2 point. It's a single point scale, and it has been derived in conjunction with the second law of thermodynamics. So that we'll study later. But this is the important relation which I hope all of you know. T in Kelvin is T in degree centigrade plus 273.15. See, we do not write degree Kelvin. We write only Kelvin. But centigrade, there is a degree sign. And T in Rankine is T in degree Fahrenheit plus 459.67. So T in Rankine is 1.8 times T in Kelvin, and T in degree Fahrenheit is 1.8 times T in degree centigrade plus 32. So these relation again you should remember for solving MCQ type question for interconversion of temperature scales. For PV is equal to RT, we always use temperature in Kelvin. There is something called ideal gas temperature scale.
सर
हाँ जी.
सर जैसे क्या आपने बोला कि सब्सटेंसेस के इंडिपेंडेंट होते हैं, जैसे केल्विन तो हमें पता है कि 0 केल्विन होता है तो मॉलिक्यूलर मोशन टोटली सीज हो जाती है थ्योरेटिकली. तो सर ऐसी जो रैनकाइन स्केल है उसकी जो लोअर लिमिट है जैसे 0 रैनकाइन, उसकी क्या assumptions होती है, मतलब उस पे क्या होता है?
See, it's an English unit. Same thing. और मॉलिक्यूलर मोशन पे नहीं डिफाइन किया हुआ है ये. 0 Kelvin is defined on the basis of triple point of water. So we do not define 0 Kelvin. The It's I have not mentioned here, but it depends on the reference is triple point of water.
सर ट्रिपल पॉइंट जो होता है वाटर का वो मतलब जितने भी एक्सटर्नल फैक्टर्स होते हैं प्रेशर वॉल्यूम या टेम्परेचर जो भी अफेक्ट कर सकते हैं उन सबके इंडिपेंडेंट होता है।
हाँ, ट्रिपल पॉइंट वो स्टेट है जहाँ पे सारे फेज एक साथ को एग्जिस्ट कर सकते हैं। So just wait for a few classes. We'll be discussing about second of thermodynamics, and then we'll take into this temperature scale once again. So abhi आप just take this for granted, and then I'll tell you. Actually, it's not as simple. Kelvin scale कई बार change हुआ है। अभी मैं आपको यही बता रहा था। The reference point has been changed in 1927. This is called International Temperature Scale 27. Then it was changed in ITPS for 1948. Then in 68, and the recent one is International Temperature Scale of 1990, where unit of thermodynamics temperature is Kelvin, which is defined as fraction 1/273.16 of thermodynamic temperature of the triple point of water. What does this thermodynamic temperature means? This we'll discuss once we discuss about second law of thermodynamics. So this international temperature scale is not thermodynamic scale, but it is more or less similar to thermodynamic scale. So thermodynamic temperature scale is different, but the temperature scale in Kelvin which we use is more or less same as thermodynamic scale. Now on this scale, ice point remain at 0 degree centigrade, and it's been same in ITS 90. These are the conferences which take place where renowned scientists from all over the world, they gather together and they decide on the reference point of temperature. So this is International Temperature Practical Scale of 1968, means the conference which took place in 1968. There they decided, okay, we'll consider this as 0 degree Kelvin or 0 Kelvin. Steam point is 99.975 in degree centigrade in ITS 90. Some uncertainty, and it's 100 degree centigrade in ITPS in 68. So I wrote this in this slide because I found there's one question asked on International Temperature Scale of 1990. So for now, you can take these data as for granted. We'll be discussing in detail about the thermodynamic temperature scale when we discuss about the second of thermodynamics. I was talking about ideal gas temperature. So ideal gas temperature scales is consider some property of the gas. Say there is something called constant volume gas thermometer. So it take into consideration that at low pressure the temperature of the gas is proportional to its pressure at constant volume. So T is equal to A plus BP. So if you plot 2 points, then you can find out values of A and B. These 2 points again can be the ice point and the steam point. So just locate 2 points and then join these 2 points by a straight line. You will get and then calibrate it in terms of temperature. So you'll get the thermometer, which actually it's measuring volume, but it's measuring pressure it's a constant volume thermometer. So volume of the gas is constant, but as the temperature changes, pressure also changes. So this instrument is actually pressure gauge. It's changing pressure, but the change in pressure is because of the temperature. So we can calibrate this instrument which is measuring pressure in terms of temperature in Kelvin or degree centigrade. So this calibration can be done by drawing, by interpolating or by drawing a straight line for ice point and the steam point. So few points regarding pressure. Pressure is defined as normal force which is exerted by a fluid per unit area. The unit is Newton per square meter when It's also called Pascal. Now 1 bar is 10 is to 5 Pascal, also equal to 0.1 megapascal or 100 kilopascal. This is the one which we'll be using for most of our calculation. Now 1 atmospheric pressure is 101.325 Pascal or 101.325 kilopascal or 101.01325 bars. Now all those instruments which measure pressure, they do measure Gauss pressure or vacuum pressure. This is not the value of pressure which we use in for the calculation in, say, in gas equation. So this is pressure with reference to the atmospheric pressure. So if you assume this red color line as the atmospheric pressure, then what this instrument is measuring is pressure above atmospheric pressure. So absolute pressure would be equal to atmospheric pressure plus Gauss pressure. Gauss pressure means pressure measured by the instrument. Similarly, if you have a instrument which is measuring vacuum pressure, so then vacuum pressure is measured with reference to the atmospheric pressure. So again, in this case, absolute pressure would be equal to atmospheric pressure minus vacuum pressure. So Gauss pressure is absolute pressure minus atmospheric pressure, or absolute pressure is equal to Gauss pressure plus atmospheric pressure. Similarly, vacuum pressure is atmospheric pressure minus absolute pressure. So we must calculate absolute pressure for all our calculations. That means we must consider atmospheric pressure along with the Gauss pressure. Now, how pressure is being measured by different instrument? Take into account that pressure changes with height. So if the pressure on the surface of the liquid is atmospheric pressure, then as you move in, pressure at this point would be equal to atmospheric pressure plus pressure exerted by this column of liquid. So if you calculate force exerted as m into g and then divide it by the area, you will come out this expression, rho gh. So rho is the density of the liquid, g is gravity, and h is the height of the column above this point. P below is P atmosphere plus rho gh. Now this instrument which measures pressure of atmosphere, it works on the same principle. So there is an inverted tube with vacuum in it, and this is kept over mercury. So when atmospheric pressure acts here, then the column of mercury rises in this inverted tube. So this is H. So this is the pressure corresponding to this H is the atmospheric pressure, because it's vacuum, no atmosphere at this point. So whatever pressure is exerted here is exerted here in equilibrium condition. So if you measure this H multiplied by rho and G, we'll get the atmospheric pressure. Say for example, if H is 76 centimeter, 0.76 meter, then pressure is, this is density of mercury in kg per meter cube. I just said that the specific gravity is 13.6, so density is 13,600 kg per meter cube multiplied by G and multiplied by the value of H. So if you do this calculation, you'll get this pressure as the atmospheric pressure. There's a U-tube manometer which is used for calculation of pressure in a vessel. So if it's a high pressure vessel, then the height of the column in two limbs of mercury changes. So pressure exerted here will force the mercury column to rise up, and this difference in the column of mercury is equivalent to the excess pressure in this chamber. So again, if you multiply rho g with this H, we'll get the pressure within this chamber. Now, in this case, if the specific gravity is 0.85, then rho becomes 0.85 into 1000, G 9.8, and H is 55 centimeter multiplied by divided by 1000 divided by 100 to convert it into meter. So that will give you Gauss pressure in this chamber. Again, this is pressure in relation to the atmospheric pressure, because at this point atmospheric pressure is acting. So rho gs should not be used for the purpose of calculation. What you should have done is calculate rho gs, convert it into kilopascal, add to this. That will give you an absolute pressure, and that value of pressure is to be used for the purpose of calculation. Just to give you an idea, this is a question which we discussed, and I also gave you in one of the class tests in your third semester. If Gauss pressure of an automobile tire is 210 kilopascal before a trip and 220 kilopascal after the trip at a location where the atmospheric pressure is 95 kPa, assuming the volume of the tire remains constant and the air temperature before the trip is 25 degrees centigrade, determine air temperature in the tire after the trip. The question is not very difficult, because pressure, if for a constant volume process, P1 by T1 is equal to P2 by T2. So you have been given P1 and P2, and T1 is known, temperature before the trip. So you have to calculate T2. So that way it's a simple question. But what I want to tell you from this question is, these are Gauss pressure. These are not absolute pressure. So what you should have done is add atmospheric pressure to this. This will become P1, 210 plus 95. 220 plus 95 becomes P2, and then find out ratio multiplied by 25 to get T2. So P1 is 210 plus 95, P2 is 220 plus 95, and then we use our gas equation, or P1 V1 by T1 is equal to P2 V2 by T2. It's a constant volume process, so V1 V2 cancel out, and you get T2 as, again in terms of Kelvin, convert it into degree centigrade. So